When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the second part of this video because all this information is really important and I couldn't put it all in one video. I made it into two so you don't lose the focus on what all of this is really about, which is your preparedness and the best way for you to prepare for anything that may be coming your direction. All right, so that's why I encourage you to share this with your friends and family. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. All those things is going to help to put this video up front so other people can get this information, which could potentially be life-saving. Because if they get this information and they start preparing because they have never done it, or they share this with their family or friends so they can start preparing, it could potentially save a life. So I encourage you to share this with your friends and loved ones. All right, so today this is the second part of this whole Russia-China deal, because we have seen a lot of movement. All right, as I shared in the past video, Russia is starting to do a lot of training really close to the Alaskan border, right? And if you haven't seen that video prior to this one, I encourage you to go watch it so you can get all that information on that. And also some of the things that they have done when they intercept our airplanes is that they're being more aggressive. The last thing that they did this past week is that they were flying really close in the nose of our B-52 bomber, and causing it to have turbulence and the pilot not being able to really control the airplane that good. So all of those things can be provocations, because let's say that the Russian aircraft or, the Russian fighter jet actually caused the B-52 bomber to fall out of the sky. What would happen? What would be the repercussions of all of that? And more than likely there will be sanctions and maybe possibly a war. I don't know. All right, but what I want to be talking about today now is the Chinese part of all of this, because they are very aggressive against the United States as well. All right, because we have a lot of tensions, because not only the trade war, as we have seen, which is starting to pick up again a little bit, but also the fact that they are lacking food, they're lacking water, they're having a lot of really hardship in the country right now, and they're having shortages of food and everything. And what doesn't help is that we're blaming them for what happened with COVID-19. We're asking them for reparations, that they owe us trillions and trillions of dollars for releasing it and not really telling us in advance that this was coming our way so we can prepare the population and yada yada yada. All right, so that's happening. Now, as far as that Taiwan goes, that's the main issue here, because that's one of the things that we're really grabbing onto and holding on to. And even though that Taiwan for us is kind of like South Korea to us, we're going to defend it against North Korea. We're doing the same thing with Taiwan, and not only Taiwan, but also the Philippines and all the surrounding area right there. Because all that sea is being disputed. Even though China is pretty much claiming them for themselves, the United States is going around making patrols, making sure that everything's okay. So in the past week, the Chinese government did say, they did announce that they were going to do pretty much war games in the South China Sea. And, pretty much telling everybody so they can stay away from the area and there wouldn't be any type of, I guess you can say accident, because they're shooting live rounds, right? And you don't want one of those to hit any kind of shipping vessel, fishing vessel, a cruise, or even a military aircraft like the United States. So that's what happened this week. We did go in there. All right, even though they say it was off limits, we went in there, we didn't care. So what they did was the following headline. Here it is. China fires aircraft carrier killer missile in warning to U.S. This from Al Jazeera. The South China Morning Post reported on Thursday that Beijing fired one intermediate range ballistic missile, DF-26B, from Qinghai province, and another medium range ballistic missile, DF-21D, from Xinjiang province on Wednesday in response to U.S. aerial activity in a no-fly zone. According to the newspaper, a U.S. U-2 spy plane had reportedly entered a Chinese designated no-fly zone on Tuesday without permission during a live-fire naval drill conducted by China in the Bohai Sea of its north coast. In a social media post, Li Xiangming, China's ambassador to the United Kingdom, said that the U.S. move severely disrupted Chinese normal exercise and training activities. All right, so that is very significant because, like I stated a minute ago, they were doing drills. They let everybody know, they put a no-fly zone, do not come through this area because we're shooting live rounds. But what did we do? We went right through it, right? We didn't care. We said, screw it all. We went right through it. So what they did is that they shot one of those. Of course, that's a message to the United States because they're pretty much saying, keep messing with us. We're going to sink one of your carriers one day. All right. They're showing that they have the weapons to do it. And, showing weapons like this is really a deterrence because otherwise, why would we show them that we have, nuclear bombs, that we have, submarines, that we have aircraft carriers, new airplanes, F-35, 22, all of that. It's because it works as a deterrent. And the reason that works as a deterrent is like, you don't want to mess with somebody that has better equipment than you do, which this is going to be the part of the preparedness. I'm going to interject it right here. All right. You always want to gather intelligence because that's going to let you know what your enemy has. If let's say a group of people were coming to your house, all right, and they only have handguns, then what's going to be best for you is that you're going to have rifles, whether it's the AR-15 rifles or it's a hunting rifle. You can be further away and you can hit them with more accuracy than they would try to do with their handgun. All right. Now let's say that they also had handguns and rifles and all that with really good scopes. Then that you want to have the best tactical position and you want to have barriers and things in the way that's going to make it difficult for them to spot out where you are, where you're shooting them in secret, because you're going to know your area better than somebody who's going to try and invade your space to try to get your stuff, And another thing also is that if, let's say they had drones and everything like that, then do you have the weaponry for you to be able to knock it out of the air? But the point is that intelligence is really important because then you know what to expect. Then you can make a plan to go against it and you can become victorious. That is the reason why it's important for you to have intelligence gathering. Now, there's several ways that you can do that. One, you need to learn how to infiltrate a group. If let's say that it's you and a group of neighbors, right? That is going to be your prepper community, and there's another rival out there, then you would have to send spies in there to see what's going on, to see what they're planning, and then they can relay the information back. And then that way you can prepare. If there's a set day for them to attack your area, the type of weapons, like I mentioned a minute ago, things like that. Another way is for you to have ham radio, because even if there's a grid down scenario where an EMP got, all over the United States and there's no grid anymore, or it was a cyber attack, if you have access to the ham radio and you can make it operate efficiently, you have the antenna for it, you have the repeaters and all of that. If you're able to communicate with someone outside the United States, you can find out what's being reported in their country about what's going on inside the United States. Because you may be, let's say, an hour away from a major city, but if you know that major city is being attacked by a military, then you can get your town and the surrounding area prepared for a battle. All right, that's why it's important for you to gather intelligence, and that's why it's important for you to have alliances. It's important for you to be able to feed everybody, because, like people have said in the past, an army moves on its belly, and they're gonna be as loyal as the day you can feed them, or until the day you cannot feed them. The point is that you're gonna have to have all of this in place and very well organized so it can be successful. All right, that's why alliances is very important, which is something the United States is actually proven to be true. All right, which is my next headline. U.S.-China relations. Mark Esper urges allies to help counter China in Indo-Pacific. This from the South China Morning Post. In an address on Wednesday in Hawaii, Esper said the U.S. Defense Department was incredibly focused on China as a threat in the Indo-Pacific and globally, in response to what he described as Beijing's undermining of the international order and aggressive modernization of its People's Liberation Army. The U.S. strategy would include strengthening alliances, bolstering U.S. military capabilities, and expanding a network of like-minded partners, he said. Very important right there. Quote, the Indo-Pacific is the epicenter of a great power competition within China. We're not going to see this region, an inch of ground, if you will, to another country, any other country that thinks their form of government, their views on human rights, their view on sovereignty, their views on freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, all those things, that somehow that's better than what many of us share, end quote. All right, so that is something important that he said, and something that we have said, especially me here, as a prepper, that alliances is the most important thing you can have against a very strong enemy. That is the reason why Esper has come out and, he's trying to make alliances with people that think, like him, to quote him correctly, he said, with like-minded partners. That's something that we have always said in the prepper community. You need to find like-minded people for, that will help you prepare, that will make alliances with you. Now, let's say that right now that you cannot find anyone, and this is another prepping part of all of this. If you cannot find people who will help you prepare, all right, as you have heard me in the past say, you have to make your list and see who will help you. But the people who will not help you, you can still prepare for those people to become workers, all right? Because let's say that you have big enough farmland to where you can make them, you can carve out a space for them to be able to eat and drink and, have shelter. Then you're going to have, that's one way that you're going to have yourselves some loyalty, because these people are going to depend on you now. So even if you cannot, or even if people do not want to prepare with you now, do focus on, do prepare for them. Do prepare for them to come back to you later, because they know that you are a prepper. All right. So I want to go back to what I was trying to tell Mike Adams when I had the interview, but since I was so nervous, I didn't really say it properly the way I wanted to say it. So I'm going to say it here in this podcast, where I'm a little more cool-headed and I'm not in the spot, where I'm nervous. So the first step that you want to take, as far as making your alliances, is that you want to write down everyone. But in order for you to not forget anyone, so you're not thinking who you left out, is that you write down everyone starting with your family. All right, this could be your spouse, this could be your children, stuff like that. Even if you're single, then you can start with the people you grew up with. But we're going to take the route of somebody with a family, with a spouse and kids. Now, you can write down your spouse's family, their mom, dad, and brothers and sisters. Then you can move on to the brothers and sisters, whether they're married or not, and if they have kids. And then you can move on to your spouse, mom or dad, whether they have siblings, and how far that stretches. And then once you're done with all of your spouses, family members, then you can think of your own. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and they're married, and they have 3 kids each. And you write it down. My parents, my aunt's still living, and she's close. This one is really far away, so it probably wouldn't work. She's this old, stuff like that you want to consider. Then you want to move on to your friends, and you write them down as well. And the friends that you write down is people that you trust, people that come to your birthday party, people who you go to their birthday parties or their children's birthday parties, that you go vacation together, their parents, intimate stuff like that. Those are the people you can trust. People from work that that have heard you talk about preparedness, or somehow they find out about it, or you talked about it because, you're cool at work, but you don't really talk to each other outside of work. Then you can present them with the opportunity as well, but, don't give them too many details. All right. So once you have everyone written down, then what you should do is you go and you break down all those people into 3 categories, each individual person, into adults who are responsible, who will listen to your message, 2 children, all the children in the family, and the cutoff age is 15 years old. So anyone 15 and older, they would be the ones taking up arms, helping out and everything. And as that 17-year-old in Wisconsin showed us, is that they can handle a weapon too. And then the third one would be people who are unreliable. This could be either because of a disease, because they have some type of disability, or maybe just because they're the lazy people in the family, or because they have an addiction. they could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be anything. So you have to put them in that category as well, because you have to count them too. They're gonna want to have a shelter, they're gonna want to have food and water and protection. So you go with all the adults and you make a meeting and you ask everyone to come, and then you present them with the opportunity to prepare with you, because the more people you have, the more resources you can bring together, and the more things can get done faster. So then you present the idea to everyone, in detail, say it's many of us here, we all have families, we should all put money together and buy 40, 50, 100 acres of land, and try to put a house or several houses there and stuff like that, depending on the budget, really. And then people will either reject you or they will agree with you. The best time to do that is now, because 2020 has just been completely insane, right? So right now people are more open to the idea of preparing, because each disaster that we have seen in the past, they have always created new preppers. So this would be the perfect opportunity for you to be able to do that. All right. So once you present them with the opportunity, the people who don't want to, that they're going to say, no, it's okay. You still have to count them in, even though you will not give them any details. All right. The people who did agree with you and they did want to become part of the group. All right. What's going to happen then in the part of that planning is that each one of them is going to become a manager over an area of preparedness. One can become the manager of the garden, or the crops. Make sure that everybody has a balanced meal, that you have enough space for you to be able to put crops, that the soil is fertile. They have all the knowledge on seeds, when to plant them, where to ferment them, do all those things. They're going to have to accumulate all that knowledge, all right? And if there's any problems, they're the ones you go to. The next one would be livestock. They can spot out a disease in chickens. They can spot out, fly strike in chickens. They can know when the rabbits are old enough to mate or old enough to actually eat, turkeys, whatever you want to put on there would be the livestock. They would be in charge of that. How to butcher them, what to feed them, how much they're going to feed, as terms of how many pounds they eat, all that. So that can be included for the gardener or the farmer, so they can, plan for how much they're going to grow for the animals as well. And they're going to be preserving for later on. The other person would be communications. The other manager would be communications. They're responsible to know how the ham radio works, what kind of antennas you need, everything. Like they could even put together a ham radio without having all the components at home, so they can rig it, stuff like that. That would be the people that would happen. Those are the people that would bring all this together, and they'll be the ones that you prep with. And it would actually be beneficial for all those people, all those managers, to do it at home on a regular basis. If the person that is responsible for gardening, they'll always have a garden in their house 24/7, 365, whatever it is that they can grow at different seasons, and they actually give it to everybody else, so they can see that they are doing a good job. Especially if you put the group together, you want to make sure that they are doing a good job, that can actually grow vegetables, that they have the green thumb, and they don't have crop failure. Because if they're having crop failure in a controlled environment, they're going to have failures in an uncontrolled environment. All right. So all those things are what you got to consider. If the person who is going to be raising the livestock, You know, they gotta make sure that they have chickens with them year round. They have the goats year round. They have rabbits year round, and they take care of that. You know, so that's the whole idea behind all of that. Now, let's put them aside and go back to all the people who either are lazy, they have a disease, an addiction, or they just didn't want to prepare with you, right? Because they're gonna bring their kids and they're gonna bring their spouses with you because they know you're preparing and that you had a plan. All right. All those people are going to become the workers because you're going to need workers. All right. They're going to be the ones plowing the ground. They're going to be the ones picking all the weeds from the garden. They're going to be the ones shoveling all the poop out of the barn, you know, stuff like that. All those things, they're the ones that are going to be responsible for because they had the opportunity to prepare with you. Now what they have to do is they have to earn their keep because you're the one that's going to feed them. You're the one that's going to provide warmth, you know, shelter and security. So that's the way that you prepare for people who didn't want to prepare, especially if they're in your family. All right. So do not be the type of prepper that says you come to my house and I'll shoot you in the face, you know, because you're just going to create yourself even more enemies. And, you know, something that the Bible said is that lawlessness would be everywhere and that would cause people's you know, love or heart to go cold, and we don't want to fulfill that prophecy within us. So with that being said, I do encourage you to prepare the right way. That would be the right way to do it. All right. So anyways, I want to move on to the next headline. This is it. China warns necessary countermeasures coming for any Asian country willing to host U.S. missiles. This from Zero Hedge. Quote, the U.S. attempt to deploy land-based medium-range missiles is consistent with its increased military presence in the Asian Pacific and so-called Indo-Pacific strategy over the past years. It's a typical demonstration of its Cold War mentality. Foreign Minister spokesman Xiao Liang said, I'm probably killed that really bad. He said that on Friday. Quote, if the U.S. side goes ahead with its plan for deploying intermediate range missiles in the Asian Pacific region, China will take the necessary counter steps to protect its interest in the field of security. The statement continued. China is calling upon the Asian Pacific countries to realize the real purpose of U.S. actions and their grave effects and to avoid pulling chestnuts out of the fire for others, Xiao added. Further calling it a blatant provocation, this statement underscored that it's part of a broader pattern of Washington's erosion of global and regional stability through its words and deeds. Beijing slammed any potential further missile host nation in Asia as revealing some countries act as mere pawns of the U.S. We all call on countries in the Asian Pacific region to be soberly aware of the true intention behind the severe consequences of the U.S. move and refrain from acting as a pawn of the U.S. At least initially, it would likely only be Guam that would see any early missile deployment. Alright, so that part is really important because even though we're trying to, you know, the United States is trying to, you know, put missiles in place that would be tactically efficient, as we have done with Russia, because we have put missiles in Russian border. We have put military equipment, you know, we have put a lot of stuff near Russia, you know, our Patriot systems and everything. It's something that we have never done to China. All right. Now we're making that move to do it. And China is recognizing it. And he's telling people, you know, other countries, other prime ministers, presidents, whatever the title may be, that if they do host U.S. missiles, that more than likely they're going to get bombed as well. Now, one thing that I want to mention that I mentioned in the previous video when I was talking about Russia is that Russia said that they already had bases that were NATO countries that are hosting missiles as well, that they would get attacked. You know, that would be the first wave of attacks as a missile approach, an ICBM approach to the United States. So the same aspect, or the same principle can be applied with China. Now, he's warning all the Asian Pacific countries not to do it, you know, before they actually start doing it. Now, Japan has actually come out and said that they're not going to host any U.S. military missiles because they don't want to be a target of China. All right, so that warning has already, been taken into consideration by other nations. So it's not like the U.S. can actually push them over the edge and actually force them into taking or, hosting any type of missile systems or anything like that. So there is resistance on part of the neighbors or, the alliances in the Asian Pacific, who are actually saying no. So anyways, the next headline that I have for you is this. U.S.-China military clash, a real danger before November vote, warns ex-Australian PM Kevin Rudd. This from the South China Morning Post. Former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has warned of the growing risk of military conflict between China and the United States amid rising nationalism in both countries in the run-up to the U.S. presidential election. Rudd, who led Australia from 2007 to 2010, and again for 3 months in 2013, said on Thursday that the buildup of Chinese and U.S. forces in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait raised the possibility of conflict through miscalculation and escalation ahead of November 3rd vote. All right, very, very important, because if you remember, I said this in the last podcast, but I've said this in the past too, however many videos ago that I did, is that since the Pentagon has been really working on a strategy, right? They do this every day. They do it for a living. They have been working on a strategy on when it would be the time where China would actually defeat the United States in a conflict. They say that it would happen all the way 2032. Okay. So when you make sense of the whole idea of the simulation and everything, you have to think, well, in order for us to be able to defeat China, we're not going to wait until 2032 to do it, because then that's when we get our butt kicked, right? We're going to do it much earlier when we're still strong enough to kick their butt, right? So that's when I say that, within, if that was 10 years from now, you can bring it back to 5 years from now. All right. So I said that. And, I said in those days, you have this time from now until 2005 to get ready for a war. So you have 5 years. And then the Australian, think tank, I forget their name, they said that we had about 3 years. That the more than likely in 3 years we would go to war against China. All right. So that got reduced from 10 to 5 that I was pretty much recommending, or suggesting really. And then these people came out and they say 3 years, more than likely in 3 years. They said 1 year, not likely, 2 yes, and then 3 definitely. But what about 4 and 5? Is that established fact that it's gonna happen? Who knows? We kind of have to wait and see. But now, this prime minister, he's coming in and say that more than likely we could go to war before the November election. So it could be any time between now, which today is August 31st, all the way to November 2nd. Between that time, could we see a war a war between the U.S. and China? That's a possibility. And, people always talk about the October surprise. Could this be the October surprise that everybody is waiting for? Because if we were to go to a nuclear war against against China, then more than likely Trump either A, could get reelected, or B, he can call martial law, call off the elections, and say, wait until we get, control of this situation to where we're not in open warfare anymore. That's a possibility as well, something that you have to consider. So now the timeline from 10 years got reduced to 5, from 5 to 3, and from 3 to maybe a month and a half or 2. Who knows? But the point is that you don't have very much time left. And that has been the warning that have been given for a long time, or at least since January, that we have very short amount of time for us to get prepared. Now, people have said it's not an easy thing to do to just go buy a house or go buy a big plot of land, especially with everything that's going on right now with the economy. People are just fighting and holding on to dear life to not be evicted from their homes, waiting for another wave of stimulus. So I understand that, right? But again, we do have 8 either 2 months to 5 years or 3 years. So let's say nothing happened right now through November. Let's say it was the 3 or 4 years that the think tank had come out and say, right? Let's put it at 4 years. You have 4 consecutive years for you to be aggressive on your prepping and get it done, and make sure that it's balanced and you're not just focused on one thing and, you know, and not really have covered the other, because there's people who have 5-10 years worth of food, but they have no water, or they have no weapons, you know, they have no communications, they don't even have a bug out bag. So that's why it's important for you to be level, to make sure that everything is covered before you move on to the next step, and then the next step after that. All right, so you have to make sure of that. Now, something that I have brought up in the previous video is that what would happen if NATO pretty much crumbled? If everybody called it quits, nobody was friend anymore, everybody went in their own way. What I pointed out in the previous video is that the United States relies on NATO a lot, okay? Because every time in the past you would see any type of conflict, or, you know, provocations, escalation, whatever you want to call it, with Russia, NATO was always involved. Even though that the United States is the head, NATO was always the arm. All right. So, for example, NATO is putting, you know, missiles in the Russian border. NATO is going up and down the Russian Sea, or, you know, whatever the case may be. It's always NATO. Now since NATO has changed its focus from Russia to China, there's a lot of problems that's been going on between the nations of NATO, all right, which is my final headline, and I'm going to get into the article because it's really important. Because if NATO was to no longer exist, Russia and China could have the advantage and actually attack the United States and finally take their revenge on everything that we have done to them, you know, with sanctions, with Cold Wars, with trading wars, or whatever, right? And something that I also pointed out in the previous podcast is that Russia has the technological advances. China has the warriors, you know, the army. They have the big number army. So both of them coming together against the United States is going to be a very difficult fight to win. And, you know, and in some simulations we lose very badly. All right, so that's why it's important for NATO to either remain, or for us to really prepare if it does crumble. Here's that headline. NATO's ununified front at breaking point. This from Zero Hedge. You know, just as reference, before I read this article, I'm going to give you all the nations who are within NATO, or, you know, NATO members. Albania, Belgium, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Montenegro, Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Turkey, United Kingdom, and the United States. I did that because this is going to be very important in future podcasts. The article goes on to say, last month, a Turkish, which is a NATO member, warship came one step away from firing missiles at French naval vessel, which is also a NATO member, of the coast of Libya. In response, Paris suspended its involvement in Operation Sea Guardian, a multinational maritime effort to provide security in the Mediterranean Sea and halt the arms trafficking fueling Libya's ongoing civil war. Initially, only 8 member states, notably excluding both the US and UK, supported France's official complaint. This was the only latest incident in the increasingly frequent and excessively awkward tensions between several of the Washington's core North Atlantic Treaty Organization's ally, which is NATO. Indeed, from South America to East Asia, NATO members stand divided over many critical foreign policy issues of the moment. Recent events raise serious questions about the 70-year-old alliance's lingering relevance and utility, as in what, so to speak, NATO is for. Indeed, some of the current fracture traces back to NATO's complicated genesis, the rest, mainly, to the problematic pivot after the collapse of its justification boogeyman, the Soviet Union. More recently, in ruptures that can be blamed on Mr. Trump, some NATO alliances have proven lukewarm on Washington's belligerence towards China, Iran, and Venezuela. None of this should have come as a surprise, given the alliance's problematic origins, inherent contradictions, plus its post-Soviet and post-9/11 American imperial stressors. It's remarkable that NATO has endured this long. It's a safe bet that Donald Trump knows little of this history, and is even more blind to its own role in fracturing an already embattled alliance. If anything, he sees recent internal tensions as only confirming his frequent assertion that NATO is obsolete. Yet the disturbing truth is that Trump is right, if even for all the wrong and partially self-fulfilling reasons. Alright, so that article is very extremely important because that goes to show that NATO is crumbling. If NATO crumbles, it is no longer, I guess you can say, obligated to defend the United States in any kind of attack, then that gives Russia, China, Iran, and anyone else who is the enemy of the United States to actually come and attack the United States. Because now they have an open door. Because now it would be one against one, you know. And even though the missiles, of course, the nuclear missiles will fly, which is something that we never want to see, it's something that is not far-fetched. It's not outside the realm of possibilities. So that's why I encourage you to prepare. That's why I encourage you to make sure that you pay attention to all this information and that you share with your friends and family. Because if they don't know that this is going on, then one day they're going to be caught by surprise. Because not very many people know that the United States pretty much relies on NATO very much. Right? A lot of people don't know that. Even though we're the ones that mainly fund it, we also use its strength against our enemies, especially Russia, and now we're trying to point it against China. All right, so that's why it's important for you to have this information. That's why it's important for you to support this podcast, so I can bring you this information about preparedness and what's going on around the world, especially when it comes to a subject this important. And the ways that you can support this podcast is by going to the store, MammonSurvivalStore.com. When you make a purchase, there's several things that happen, all right? One of them is that you help this podcast continue. Another thing is that we take part of the profit and we use it to help the homeless, and we use it to help the orphanages, all right? We're not anybody big yet, right? Anybody that really will pay attention to us. But with your support, we will have that, I guess you can say, the reputation to where we will be able to give out a helping hand when it really matters, you know, not just a few things here and there, but an actual significant shipment of something. For example, homeless shelters, they need a lot of food, they need a lot of water, right? But not only that, they need clothing, because they either give it away or they give it to the people they're trying to help out. You know, places like that, they really need a lot of help. And even in my private life, whenever we see a homeless person, you know, we try to help them out the best way that I can at the moment. Now, with the orphanages, what I want to do there is that I want to help those kids have wilderness survival. Because let's say that, God forbid, we do have a war, right? Like I'm talking about right now. And the United States does get nuked, or the United States does have an EMP. I want these kids to know what they should do. You know, I want them to know what to do next, what to expect, how to react. Because the administrators that are there, they're going to have to worry about their own family. And if they're, you know, if they're not taking care of the kids anymore, what's going to happen? You know, what's going to happen to all those children? So that's the thing that God has put in my heart. And one way for you to help is for you to make a purchase through the store. So that's why I encourage you to go on there. All right. So I want to leave you with that. I want to leave you with all this information that I gave you. I hope that you really pay attention to it, that you have stayed all the way to the end now, and that you will really look at your plan of survival and tweak it if you need to. Practice. You know, right now you need to practice. If you have to practice in a way that you don't have any electricity in your house for a weekend, or, you know, for several hours, then you should do so right now. if you haven't fired a weapon in a while and you are able to get the ammo for your weapon, then I encourage you to just go and get some more. Excuse me, and get some training. All right. And if you haven't stockpiled enough food and water for 2 years, I encourage you to continue to do that. All right. Your alliances, talk to the people, try the method that I taught you so you can have a more successful alliance. All right. But anyways, again, my name is Jose Prado, and remember, always ready.
The Man-Made Survival Show.